The evening mist had settled over the city like a gray blanket, but inside the Iron Forge Academy, bright lights blazed with full intensity. From the outside, this establishment appeared to be nothing more than an upscale fitness center where wealthy young people came to train and maintain their physiques. The polished glass windows revealed state-of-the-art equipment, gleaming mirrors, and what seemed like a legitimate business operation. However, intelligence reports painted a very different picture of what was really happening behind the facade. President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso stood in the shadows of a narrow alley across from the academy, his weathered hands adjusting the worn cleaning uniform he had donned for this mission. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the presidential bearing, the expensive suits, and the entourage of security personnel. In their place stood a humble janitor, complete with a rickety cleaning cart, threadbare clothes, and the hunched posture of someone who had spent years in manual labor. The intelligence briefing from 3 days ago still echoed in his mind with crystal clarity. Intelligence Officer Captain Marie Dubois had spread aerial photographs and surveillance reports across his desk, her expression grave as she outlined the scope of the operation. "Mr. President," she had said, pointing to various locations marked on the building schematics, "this gang is planning to execute a major black market deal within the next 3 days. Our sources indicate they're trafficking in illegal weapons, drugs, and worse. They're forcing young men into underground fighting rings where lives are bought and sold like commodities. If we don't stop this operation, it won't just affect our city. The chaos will spread throughout the entire region." Captain Dubois had recommended a full military assault, complete with special forces units and coordinated strikes. It was the conventional approach, the safe approach, and exactly what Ibrahim had decided against. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes, to understand the full scope of the operation before making his move. Too many innocent young people frequented this gym, and a military raid might result in casualties among those he had sworn to protect. "Sir, with all due respect," Captain Dubois had protested when Ibrahim outlined his unconventional plan, "this is extremely dangerous. If your identity is discovered, it could trigger an international incident. Let our undercover agents handle this." Ibrahim had smiled grimly, his eyes reflecting the steel that had carried him through years of political and military struggles. "Marie, sometimes a leader must go where others cannot. These criminals prey on the youth of our nation, turning hope into despair, dreams into nightmares. They won't suspect a president hiding in plain sight as a janitor. The best surveillance is often done by those who are invisible to the powerful." Now, 3 days later, Ibrahim pushed his cleaning cart through the academy's main entrance, his trained eyes already cataloging exits, security cameras, and potential threats. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly manicured nails and an air of practiced indifference, barely glanced up from her smartphone as he signed in with a forged name on the maintenance register. "New cleaning guy?" she asked without real interest, blowing a bubble with her gum. "Yes, miss," Ibrahim replied in a carefully practiced accent, keeping his voice humble and subservient. "I need this job very much. I will work hard, stay out of everyone's way." She waved him off dismissively. "Whatever. Just don't interfere with the members' workouts. This is a high-end establishment, not some charity case." As Ibrahim wheeled his cart deeper into the academy, he marveled at how easily the wealthy and powerful overlooked those they considered beneath them. It was a blind spot he had encountered throughout his political career, and one that had served him well in understanding the real struggles of his people. Here, surrounded by expensive equipment and entitled young men, he was completely invisible. Exactly as he had planned, the main workout area was impressive, filled with the latest fitness equipment and mirrors that reflected the movements of serious athletes and casual fitness enthusiasts alike. Young men in expensive workout gear moved between machines, their conversations revealing a mix of legitimate ambition and troubling undercurrents. Ibrahim began his cleaning routine, moving methodically from station to station while his trained ears picked up fragments of conversation. "Did you hear about the special event this weekend?" one muscular youth whispered to another. "Yeah, Derek said it could pay for my entire semester if I'm willing to take some risks," came the reply. "What kind of risks?" the first asked, But their conversation was cut short as they moved out of earshot. Ibrahim filed away every detail, every name, every hint of the darker activities that lurked beneath the Academy's legitimate facade. Derek Stone. That name appeared repeatedly in the intelligence reports as the suspected ringleader of the operation. A former professional fighter turned entrepreneur, Stone had built a reputation for discovering and developing fighting talent. What the reports suggested, however, was that his methods involved coercion, illegal gambling, and worse. As the afternoon wore on, Ibrahim observed the natural rhythms of the establishment. Most members were genuine fitness enthusiasts, young people working toward legitimate goals. However, a smaller group seemed to operate with different rules. They had access to areas others did not, spoke in hushed tones about opportunities and deals, and carried themselves with the swagger of those who believed they were above the law. The critical moment came near closing time. As Ibrahim emptied trash bins near the rear of the facility, he noticed a door marked Staff Only that seemed to generate unusual activity. Two heavily muscled men emerged carrying a large box, their movements careful and deliberate. The box appeared to be quite heavy, and Ibrahim caught a glimpse of what looked like cash bundles protruding from one corner where the lid hadn't been properly secured. This was the confirmation he needed. The intelligence reports were accurate. There was indeed a significant illegal operation running parallel to the legitimate gym business. However, Ibrahim knew that rushing to judgment could jeopardize not only his mission, but also the safety of innocent members who might be caught in the crossfire of any eventual law enforcement action. That night, as Ibrahim returned to his modest rented room several blocks away from the academy, he reviewed everything he had observed. His years of military training had taught him the importance of patience and thorough reconnaissance. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to gather intelligence, and he would need to be even more careful as he ventured deeper into Derek Stone's operation. Looking at himself in the small mirror above the bathroom sink, Ibrahim saw not the president of a nation, but a warrior preparing to enter enemy territory. The reflection showed a man ready to do whatever was necessary to protect his people from those who would exploit their hopes and dreams for profit. 2 more days, he whispered to himself, and then this gang's reign of terror ends. The second day at Iron Forge Academy began with the same routine, but Ibrahim could sense an undercurrent of anticipation in the air. As he arrived with his cleaning cart precisely on schedule, the atmosphere felt charged with nervous energy. Several of the regular members seemed on edge, and there was more whispered conversation than usual. Derek Stone made his first dramatic appearance of the day around mid-morning. Ibrahim had studied photographs of the man during his intelligence briefings, but seeing him in person revealed additional details that mere pictures couldn't convey. Stone stood well over 6 feet tall, with the kind of muscular build that came from years of professional training. His expensive workout clothes and gold jewelry suggested financial success, but it was his eyes that told the real story. Cold, calculating, and completely devoid of empathy. Stone moved through the gym like he owned not just the building, but everyone in it. Young trainees practically tripped over themselves trying to gain his attention, hanging on his every word as if he were dispensing wisdom from on high. Ibrahim watched this performance while methodically mopping the floor nearby, noting how Stone's charisma masked what was clearly a predatory nature. "Listen up, boys," Stone announced to a gathering of about 15 young men. "Tomorrow night we separate the real fighters from the pretenders. I've got opportunities available for those brave enough to seize them, opportunities that could change your entire life trajectory." One enthusiastic trainee, barely out of his teens, raised his hand eagerly. "What kind of opportunities, Mr. Stone? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it as a professional fighter." Stone's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "That's what I like to hear, Marcus. Ambition, drive, the willingness to step outside your comfort zone. But first, you need to prove you belong in my inner circle." As Ibrahim continued his cleaning routine, he observed Stone's recruitment tactics with growing concern. The man was clearly identifying vulnerable young people, those desperate for money, recognition, or a sense of belonging, and grooming them for something far more sinister than legitimate athletic competition. Around noon, Ibrahim witnessed an incident that crystallized the true nature of Stone's operation. A young man, perhaps 20 years old, stumbled into the gym with obvious injuries. His face showed recent bruising, his lip was split, and he moved with the careful gait of someone nursing cracked ribs. Most disturbing of all were his eyes. They held the hollow look of someone who had seen too much, experienced trauma beyond his years. Stone's reaction was telling. Rather than showing concern for the injured young man, he laughed coldly and addressed him in front of the entire group. "Well, well, well, look what the cat dragged in. This, gentlemen, is what happens when you don't follow instructions, when you think you know better than the system we've put in place." The injured youth flinched at Stone's words but remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Now, Jake here thought he could freelance, thought he could take shortcuts, but that's not how my operation works. In my world, there are consequences for going off script. Jake learned that lesson the hard way, didn't you, Jake?" A few of the younger trainees laughed nervously, but Ibrahim could see that most were disturbed by what they were witnessing. This was clearly intimidation designed to keep others in line. A demonstration of what happened to those who didn't follow Stone's rules completely. "But Jake's going to get another chance," Stone continued, his voice taking on a mock generous tone. "Tomorrow night he'll fight again. And this time, he'll do exactly what he's told, won't you, Jake?" The injured young man nodded quickly, fear evident in his posture. "Yes, sir, Mr. Stone. Whatever you say." Ibrahim's hands tightened on his mop handle, every instinct screaming at him to intervene immediately. Here was clear evidence of coercion, of young people being forced into dangerous situations against their better judgment. However, he forced himself to maintain his cover. Acting precipitously would only alert the gang to official interest in their activities and might result in their dispersing before he could gather enough evidence to shut down the entire operation. As the afternoon progressed, Ibrahim managed to position himself closer to the restricted area he had identified the previous day. By timing his cleaning routine carefully, he was able to observe more of the coming and going through the staff-only door. The pattern was becoming clear. Money and other materials were being moved in and out regularly, always by the same core group of Stone's most trusted associates. During a brief period when the area was relatively quiet, Ibrahim took a calculated risk. Pretending to clean near the restricted door, he tried the handle. To his surprise, it opened, apparently. Stone's operation was so confident in their security through intimidation that they hadn't bothered with sophisticated locks. The brief glimpse inside revealed a room set up like a command center. Multiple computer screens showed what appeared to be live feeds from various locations, financial charts tracking betting activity, and lists of names with corresponding dollar amounts. Most significantly, he saw printed schedules that appeared to coordinate fighting matches with online betting windows. Ibrahim quickly retreated before anyone noticed his unauthorized reconnaissance. But he had seen enough to confirm his worst suspicions. This wasn't just a local gang running small-time fighting matches. This was a sophisticated operation with online gambling components, probably involving international betting syndicates and significant money laundering activities. That evening, as the gym began to empty out, Ibrahim found himself alone in the main workout area for a few precious minutes. He used this opportunity to quickly photograph some documents that had been left on a table near the front desk, what appeared to be membership agreements, with unusual clauses about additional training opportunities and special event participation requirements. As he worked, Ibrahim's mind was already formulating his plan for the following day. Stone had made it clear that something significant was happening tomorrow night, and Ibrahim needed to be in position to document everything while simultaneously being ready to intervene if lives were at immediate risk. The second day of his mission was complete, and the intelligence he had gathered painted a picture of criminal activity far more extensive than even the initial reports had suggested. Tomorrow would bring the moment of truth, when Ibrahim Traoré would shed his janitor's disguise and remind these criminals that justice, though sometimes delayed, was never denied. As he packed his cleaning supplies, Ibrahim caught his reflection in one of the gym's many mirrors. The president was gone, replaced by something more primal. A predator stalking other predators. A protector preparing to unleash righteous fury on those who preyed upon the innocent. "One more day," he whispered to his reflection. "One more day, and then we end this." The third day dawned with an ominous energy that seemed to permeate every corner of Iron Forge Academy. As Ibrahim arrived for what he knew would be his final day in disguise, he could immediately sense the heightened tension among both staff and members. Today was clearly the culmination of whatever Stone had been building toward, and everyone seemed to feel the weight of approaching events. Stone himself appeared earlier than usual, his demeanor more intense and focused than Ibrahim had previously observed. He moved through the facility with the purposeful stride of a general preparing for battle, issuing crisp orders to his inner circle and making final preparations for what was clearly going to be a major operation. "Tonight changes everything," Stone announced to a gathered group of his most loyal followers. "We've been building toward this moment for months. The international interest is unprecedented. The betting pools are larger than anything we've ever handled, and the potential profits are astronomical." Ibrahim continued his cleaning routine while absorbing every detail of Stone's briefing. The scope of tonight's operation was becoming clear. This wasn't just a local illegal fighting event, but something designed to attract international attention and participation. The online gambling component suggested a global network of participants, making this a far more serious crime than simple local racketeering. As the day progressed, Ibrahim observed the arrival of several unfamiliar faces, well-dressed individuals who clearly weren't typical gym members. These appeared to be the financial backers, the organizers from other cities, and the technical specialists needed to run a sophisticated online gambling operation. Their presence confirmed that tonight's event was the culmination of extensive planning and coordination. The most disturbing development came in the early afternoon when Ibrahim witnessed the arrival of additional young fighters. Unlike the regular gym members, these individuals showed clear signs of coercion and fear. They were accompanied by Stone's enforcers and kept under close supervision, suggesting they were not willing participants but rather victims of human trafficking for forced fighting. One young man, who couldn't have been older than 18, caught Ibrahim's particular attention. The youth was clearly terrified, his hands shaking as he tried to follow the instructions being barked at him by Stone's subordinates. When he stumbled during a practice session, he was immediately grabbed by two enforcers and dragged toward the back rooms. His frightened cries echoed through the gym before being abruptly cut off. This was the moment Ibrahim realized he could no longer maintain his passive observation role. Human lives were at immediate risk, and his duty as both a leader and a human being demanded action. However, he also recognized that acting too early might allow key figures to escape and potentially harm more victims in retaliation. As evening approached, the transformation of Iron Forge Academy was remarkable. The regular gym equipment was pushed aside to create a large, open area in the center of the main floor. Professional lighting equipment was set up, along with multiple cameras for live streaming the evening's events. Most ominously, medical equipment was wheeled in. Not the basic first aid supplies one might expect at a sporting event, but serious trauma care equipment suggesting the organizers expected severe injuries. The betting operation was revealed to be far more sophisticated than Ibrahim had initially realized. The back room he had glimpsed earlier was now humming with activity as technicians managed multiple computer systems, coordinated international betting pools, and tracked enormous sums of money flowing through what appeared to be an elaborate money laundering network. Stone took center stage as the evening's festivities began, addressing a crowd that now included not just local participants, but representatives from criminal organizations across West Africa and beyond. The international scope of the operation was staggering. This was clearly a major hub in a global network of illegal activities. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an evening that will redefine underground combat sports, Stone announced with theatrical flair. Tonight we present fighters who will literally battle for their lives, where victory means freedom and defeat means, well, let's just say the stakes couldn't be higher. The crowd's enthusiastic response chilled Ibrahim to the bone. These people weren't just betting on athletic competition. They were gambling on human suffering, treating desperate young lives as entertainment. As the first official fight was about to begin, Stone made an announcement that changed everything. But first, we have a special exhibition. We're going to demonstrate what happens to those who think they can infiltrate our organization. Bring out our special guest, the janitor who's been asking too many questions. Ibrahim's blood ran cold as he realized his cover had been blown. Stone's enforcers moved toward him with confident swagger, clearly expecting to handle what they assumed was merely a nosy maintenance worker who had stumbled onto more than he could handle. What they didn't realize was that they were about to face not a helpless janitor, but a battle-hardened leader who had spent years training for exactly this kind of confrontation. As the first enforcer reached for him, Ibrahim's carefully maintained disguise fell away like a discarded mask. The transformation was instantaneous and shocking. Gone was the humble, subservient posture of the janitor. In its place stood President Ibrahim Traoré in all his formidable presence. A leader who had fought his way through political upheavals, military conflicts, and personal challenges that would have broken lesser men. "You want to see what real fighting looks like?" Ibrahim said, his voice carrying the authority of command and the promise of retribution. "Allow me to demonstrate." The first enforcer, a man easily 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier than Ibrahim, swung confidently with a haymaker punch that should have ended the confrontation immediately. Instead, Ibrahim moved with fluid precision, ducking under the wild swing and responding with a perfectly placed strike to his opponent's solar plexus. The larger man doubled over, gasping for air, before a follow-up knee strike rendered him unconscious. The crowd's reaction was immediate and electric. What they had expected to be a brief, brutal demonstration of Stone's power had instead become something entirely unexpected. A masterclass in combat skills from someone they had completely underestimated. Stone's expression shifted from confident amusement to concern as he realized this janitor was no ordinary maintenance worker. "Kill him!" he screamed to his remaining enforcers. "Kill him now before—" His orders were cut short as Ibrahim moved through the group of attackers like a force of nature. Years of military training, combined with the righteous fury of a leader protecting his people, transformed him into an unstoppable instrument of justice. Each strike was precise, each movement calculated for maximum effect with minimal effort. The second enforcer fell to a devastating combination of punches that left him unconscious before he hit the ground. The third attempted to grab Ibrahim from behind, only to find himself thrown across the room with a perfectly executed hip toss. The fourth and fifth rushed him simultaneously. But Ibrahim's superior training and experience allowed him to use their momentum against them, sending both crashing into the expensive gym equipment. As more of Stone's men entered the fray, the crowd's mood shifted from bloodthirsty anticipation to stunned amazement. This wasn't just a fight. It was an exhibition of martial arts mastery that none of them had expected to witness. Phone cameras appeared throughout the crowd as people began recording what was clearly going to be a viral sensation. Ibrahim continued to move through his opponents with methodical efficiency. A spinning kick took down 2 men simultaneously. A series of precise strikes to pressure points left another attacker paralyzed and helpless. Each victory seemed to energize Ibrahim further while simultaneously demoralizing Stone's remaining forces. "Who are you?" Stone demanded, backing away as his confidence crumbled. "No janitor fights like that." "Who sent you?" Ibrahim paused in his systematic dismantling of Stone's organization, fixing the criminal leader with a stare that conveyed both judgment and promise of justice. "My name is Ibrahim Traoré," he announced, his voice carrying clearly throughout the now silent gym. "I am the president of Burkina Faso, and I am here to clean up the mess you've made of these young people's lives." The revelation sent shockwaves throughout the assembled crowd. Phone cameras focused more intently as people realized they were witnessing a historic moment, a head of state personally taking down a criminal organization that had been terrorizing their community. Stone's remaining enforcers hesitated, clearly unsure whether to continue their attack against a sitting president. This moment of uncertainty was all Ibrahim needed to press his advantage. Moving with renewed purpose, he systematically disabled the remaining threats while ensuring that key evidence of the criminal operation remained intact. As the last of Stone's men fell to the floor, Ibrahim stood in the center of the gym, breathing steadily despite the intense physical confrontation. Around him lay the defeated members of a criminal organization that had terrorized young people and corrupted the dreams of an entire generation. But Ibrahim knew his work wasn't finished. The physical confrontation was only the beginning. Now came the crucial task of ensuring that justice was properly served and that this network of corruption was completely dismantled, with Stone's enforcers neutralized and the immediate physical threat eliminated. Ibrahim turned his attention to the broader criminal operation that had been revealed. The crowd of spectators, many of whom had traveled internationally to witness what they thought would be illegal entertainment, now found themselves face to face with the reality of law. Enforcement intervention at the highest levels. Ibrahim moved purposefully toward the back, rooms where he had observed the command center for the betting operation. Stone, still stunned by the revelation of Ibrahim's true identity, stumbled after him, alternately pleading and threatening as the magnitude of his situation became clear. "You can't do this," Stone protested. "I have connections. I have protection. This is an international operation. You're just a small country president." Ibrahim didn't respond to Stone's increasingly desperate protests. Instead, he focused on securing the evidence that would ensure not just Stone's conviction, but the complete dismantling of the international network that had been revealed through this operation. The back room proved to be even more sophisticated than Ibrahim had initially realized. Multiple computer systems were running complex algorithms to manage betting pools across different time zones and currencies. Financial records showed transactions involving millions of dollars, with money flowing to and from accounts in dozens of countries. Most damning of all were the detailed records of forced fighter recruitment, including identification documents, medical records, and what appeared to be ownership transfer agreements, evidence of literal human trafficking. Using a small device provided by his intelligence team, Ibrahim began copying the computer files while simultaneously photographing the physical evidence scattered throughout the room. Every document, every computer file, every piece of financial information would be crucial in building cases against not just Stone and his local operation, but the international network that had made this level of criminal activity possible. As Ibrahim worked, he could hear the sound of sirens approaching outside. His intelligence team, following predetermined protocols, had monitored his emergency signal and coordinated with local law enforcement to ensure that the criminals couldn't escape or destroy evidence once Ibrahim's cover was blown. The arrival of official law enforcement created a dramatic scene in the main gym area. Special forces units secured the perimeter while detectives began processing the scene and arresting the numerous criminals who had been present for the evening's illegal activities. The international nature of the operation required coordination with Interpol and various national law enforcement agencies. Captain Marie Dubois, Ibrahim's intelligence chief, arrived with the law enforcement team. Her expression mixed professional satisfaction with personal concern as she assessed the scene. "Mr. President," she said formally, though her relief at seeing him unharmed was evident, "I trust the operation was successful." Ibrahim gestured toward the defeated enforcers and the evidence being secured from the back rooms. "More successful than we anticipated, Marie. This wasn't just a local gang. We've uncovered a significant international network. The evidence we've gathered here will likely lead to arrests and prosecutions across multiple continents." As the crime scene processing continued, Ibrahim turned his attention to the legitimate gym members and young trainees who had been present when the evening's events unfolded. Many of them appeared to be in shock, only now realizing the true nature of the organization they had been associated with. One young man, Marcus, the same enthusiastic trainee Ibrahim had observed earlier, approached hesitantly. "Sir," he said, his voice shaking, "I had no idea what Mr. Stone was really doing. I thought this was about becoming a professional fighter, about making something of myself. I never would have gotten involved if I had known about the illegal stuff." Ibrahim studied the young man's face, seeing genuine remorse and fear. This was exactly the kind of vulnerable youth that Stone had targeted, someone desperate for opportunity and willing to believe promises that were too good to be true. "Marcus," Ibrahim said gently, "the fact that you were deceived doesn't make you a criminal. But it should teach you an important lesson about being cautious when opportunities seem too easy or too lucrative. Real success requires hard work, legitimate training, and ethical choices." Similar conversations played out throughout the gym as Ibrahim and the law enforcement team identified which individuals were victims, which were willing participants in criminal activity, and which fell into the gray area between. The complexity of the operation meant that each case would need to be evaluated individually. Derek Stone, now in handcuffs and facing the reality of his situation, made one final attempt to assert his former authority. "You think this changes anything?" he said, his voice filled with desperate bravado. "I have lawyers, I have connections in high places. I'll be out of prison before you know it, and when I am, I'll rebuild everything bigger and better than before." Ibrahim approached Stone directly, his presence commanding even in the chaotic aftermath of the evening's events. "Derek," he said quietly, ensuring that his words were clearly heard despite the surrounding noise, "your connections were with criminals and corrupt officials. Those connections become liabilities when exposed to the light of justice. Your lawyers will be defending you against charges in multiple countries involving human trafficking, money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy. Your bigger and better plans will be developed during a very long prison sentence." The finality in Ibrahim's voice seemed to break through Stone's denial. For the first time since his arrest, the criminal leader appeared to truly understand the scope of his legal jeopardy. As the evening progressed and the crime scene processing neared completion, Ibrahim took a moment to reflect on what had been accomplished. A 3-day undercover operation had revealed and dismantled a criminal network that had been operating with impunity for years. More importantly, it had demonstrated that justice could prevail when leaders were willing to take personal risks to protect their people. Young fighters who had been coerced into participation were being processed as victims rather than criminals, with social services and counseling support being arranged to help them rebuild their lives. The international criminals who had traveled to witness what they thought would be illegal entertainment were facing charges that would likely result in significant prison sentences. Captain Dubois approached Ibrahim as the operation neared its conclusion. "Sir," she said, "the international implications of this operation are still becoming clear. We've identified connections to similar operations in at least 12 countries. The evidence gathered here tonight will likely result in hundreds of arrests and could severely disrupt illegal gambling and human trafficking networks across multiple continents." Ibrahim nodded, satisfied that the risks he had taken had produced results far beyond what anyone had initially expected. "Marie," he replied, "sometimes the most effective way to fight crime is to go directly to where it lives and breathe the same air as the criminals. They never expect their victims to fight back with the same level of organization and determination that they use to exploit the vulnerable." In the days following the Iron Forge Academy operation, the ripple effects of Ibrahim's undercover mission spread far beyond the borders of Burkina Faso. International media coverage of a sitting president personally taking down a criminal organization captured global attention, sparking discussions about leadership, justice, and the lengths to which public servants should go to protect their citizens. The evidence gathered during the operation proved to be even more valuable than initially anticipated. Computer forensics teams working around the clock uncovered financial records linking the Iron Forge operation to similar criminal enterprises across West Africa, Europe, and Asia. The betting operation alone had processed over $50 million in illegal wagers over the previous year, with profits being used to fund everything from weapons trafficking to political corruption. Stone's organization had been more sophisticated than anyone had realized. Beyond the forced fighting matches, they had been running elaborate fraud schemes, identity theft operations, and had even been selling fake educational credentials to young people desperate for advancement opportunities. The human cost was staggering. Investigators identified over 200 victims who had been exploited in various ways by the organization. The international cooperation triggered by Ibrahim's evidence sharing led to coordinated, Raids in 8 countries, resulting in the arrest of 43 individuals and the seizure of assets worth over $20 million. More importantly, it disrupted recruitment pipelines that had been trafficking vulnerable young people across international borders for years. Back in Burkina Faso, the operation had profound effects on public perception of both government effectiveness and the ongoing fight against corruption. Young people throughout the country drew inspiration from seeing their president literally fight for their protection, while criminal organizations recognized that they could no longer operate with impunity. Ibrahim used the international attention generated by the operation to launch a broader initiative addressing youth exploitation across West Africa. Working with international partners, he established a task force specifically focused on identifying and dismantling criminal networks that targeted young people with false promises of opportunity. The Iron Forge operation showed us that criminals are increasingly sophisticated in their methods. Ibrahim explained to a gathering of West African leaders. They exploit our young people's dreams and ambitions, turning hope into despair for profit. Our response must be equally sophisticated and coordinated. The program that emerged from this initiative included enhanced intelligence sharing between countries, improved training for law enforcement officers, and most importantly, expanded legitimate opportunities for young people to pursue their ambitions through legal channels. Marcus, the young trainee who had been targeted by Stone's organization, became an informal spokesperson for the victims who had been exploited. His testimony before international law enforcement agencies helped investigators understand the psychological manipulation tactics used by criminal recruiters. They made everything sound so legitimate, so professional, Marcus explained during one such session. Mr. Stone talked about international opportunities, about connections with professional sports organizations, about financial rewards that could change our entire family's circumstances. When you're desperate for opportunity, you want to believe that someone successful is willing to help you. Marcus's experience highlighted the broader social and economic factors that made young people vulnerable to exploitation. Limited educational opportunities, high unemployment rates, and social pressure to achieve rapid financial success created conditions where criminal organizations could easily recruit victims. In response, Ibrahim's administration launched expanded vocational training programs, increased support for legitimate athletic development, and created new pathways for young people to access higher education and professional development opportunities. The goal was to provide real alternatives to the false promises offered by criminal organizations. The legal proceedings against Stone and his associates became a showcase for international cooperation in criminal justice. With charges filed in multiple countries and evidence gathered through coordinated operations, the cases demonstrated how effective law enforcement could be when countries worked together systematically. Stone himself, facing the reality of spending decades in prison, eventually agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed details about criminal networks that investigators had been pursuing for years, leading to additional arrests and the recovery of millions of dollars in stolen assets. "I never intended for things to go as far as they did," Stone said during one court session. "It started with just organizing some underground fights, making some easy money. But the profits were so enormous that we kept expanding, kept finding new ways to monetize the operation. Eventually, we lost sight of the fact that we were destroying people's lives." His words provided insight into how criminal organizations evolve and expand, often beyond the original intentions of their founders. This understanding helped law enforcement agencies develop better strategies for identifying and intervening in criminal enterprises before they could reach the scale of the Iron Forge operation. The young fighters, who had been coerced into participation in Stone's operation, received comprehensive support services, including medical care, psychological counseling, and assistance in pursuing legitimate career opportunities. Several were able to continue their athletic aspirations through proper channels, while others discovered new interests and abilities through the expanded programs created in response to the operation. One such success story was Jake, the injured fighter Ibrahim had observed during his undercover work. With proper medical treatment and counseling support, Jake recovered from his physical injuries and discovered a talent for coaching younger athletes. He eventually established a legitimate boxing program focused on helping at-risk youth develop discipline and self-confidence through proper athletic training. "President Traoré saved my life," Jake said during a community event celebrating the anniversary of the Iron Forge operation. "Not just because he stopped the fighting matches, but because he showed me that there were people in positions of authority who actually cared about what happened to people like me. That gave me the motivation to rebuild my life the right way." The operation also had significant effects on Ibrahim's international standing. His willingness to personally risk his safety to protect his citizens earned respect from leaders around the world, while his effective use of intelligence gathering and international cooperation became a model for other countries facing similar challenges. However, Ibrahim was careful to emphasize that the operation's success was not due to individual heroism, but rather to systematic preparation, international cooperation, and most importantly, a commitment to addressing the underlying social conditions that made criminal exploitation possible. "The real victory wasn't me defeating Stone's enforcers in physical combat," Ibrahim explained during a speech to the United Nations General Assembly. "The real victory was the international cooperation that dismantled an entire network of exploitation and the programs we've built to provide legitimate opportunities for young people who might otherwise be vulnerable to criminal recruitment." This perspective helped establish Ibrahim as a thought leader on issues of youth development, international law enforcement cooperation, and the intersection of social policy with crime prevention. His approach influenced similar programs in other countries and contributed to improved international protocols for addressing transnational criminal organizations. The Iron Forge Academy itself was converted into a community center offering legitimate athletic training, educational programs, and career development services. The transformation from a den of criminal activity to a hub of positive community development became a powerful symbol of the possibility for redemption and renewal. As Ibrahim reflected on the operation and its aftermath, he recognized that it represented something more significant than just successful law enforcement. It demonstrated the importance of leadership that was willing to understand problems from ground level, take personal risks to protect citizens, and work persistently to address root causes rather than just symptoms. "A leader's job is not just to make policy from an office," he said during a community meeting in the converted Iron Forge building. "Sometimes a leader must go where the problems actually exist, breathe the same air as both the criminals and their victims, and understand the reality of what people face every day. Only then can we develop solutions that actually work." The operation became a defining moment of Ibrahim's presidency, but more importantly, it sparked a fundamental shift in how governments across the region approached the challenge of protecting their most vulnerable citizens. 6 months after the Iron Forge operation, Ibrahim stood before a gathering of young people in the renovated community center that had once housed Derek Stone's criminal empire. The transformation was remarkable. Where illegal gambling computers had once processed millions in dirty money, students now worked on legitimate business plans for startup enterprises. Where coerced fighters had once prepared for brutal matches, aspiring athletes trained under qualified coaches who prioritized safety and proper development. "This building tells a story," Ibrahim addressed the assembled youth, many of whom had been directly or indirectly affected by Stone's organization. "It tells the story of what happens when we choose hope over despair, legitimate opportunity over quick fixes, and community support over individual exploitation." Among the audience sat Marcus, who had become a peer counselor helping other young people recognize and resist criminal recruitment tactics. Beside him was Jake, now running a successful boxing program that had produced 2 national championship contenders through proper training methods. Their presence represented the transformation that was possible when criminal exploitation was replaced with genuine opportunity. The ripple effects of the operation had extended far beyond individual success stories. The international task force established in response to Ibrahim's intelligence gathering had identified and dismantled 17 similar operations across 4 continents. More significantly, the collaborative approach had led to the development of new protocols for international law enforcement cooperation that were being adopted by police agencies worldwide. Captain Marie Dubois, now promoted to head the expanded International Criminal Intelligence Division, presented regular briefings on the ongoing effects of the operation. The financial networks uncovered through Stone's computers had revealed previously unknown connections between seemingly unrelated criminal organizations, allowing law enforcement to map and disrupt entire ecosystems of illegal activity. The Iron Forge data has been what we call a Rosetta Stone for understanding modern transnational crime, Captain Dubois explained during a briefing to regional security officials. Stone's organization was more connected than we initially realized. They weren't just running local operations. They were part of a global network that included human trafficking, weapons smuggling, money laundering, and even terrorist financing. The breadth of Stone's connections had initially been overwhelming for investigators, but it ultimately provided unprecedented insight into how modern criminal organizations operated across international boundaries. This intelligence had enabled law enforcement agencies to develop more effective strategies for identifying and disrupting criminal networks before they could reach the scale of the Iron Forge operation. Ibrahim's approach to the operation had also influenced law enforcement training programs around the world. The combination of deep cover intelligence gathering, personal risk-taking by leadership, and systematic evidence collection became a case study taught in police academies and intelligence training centers. However, Ibrahim was always careful to emphasize that the operation's success depended more on addressing underlying social conditions than on dramatic law enforcement interventions. You cannot arrest your way out of a social problem, he explained during a conference on youth development policy. Criminal organizations like Stone's exist because they exploit real vulnerabilities in our societies: unemployment, limited educational opportunities, social pressure for rapid financial success. Unless we address these underlying conditions, we will continue to face similar challenges. This philosophy led to comprehensive policy reforms across Burkina Faso and neighboring countries. Educational systems were expanded to provide more practical training opportunities. Economic development programs were designed to create legitimate employment for young people in rural and urban areas alike. Most importantly, social support systems were strengthened to help families and communities identify and respond to signs that young people were being targeted by criminal recruiters. The international attention generated by the operation had also created unexpected opportunities for positive change. Foreign governments and international organizations, impressed by Ibrahim's hands-on approach to governance, increased their support for development programs in West Africa. Investment in legitimate business development, educational infrastructure, and healthcare systems provided alternatives to the criminal enterprises that had previously filled these gaps. One of the most significant long-term effects was the establishment of the West African Youth Protection Initiative, a multinational program designed to share intelligence about criminal recruitment tactics while simultaneously creating legitimate opportunities for young people across the region. The program operated on multiple levels. Intelligence sharing allowed law enforcement agencies to identify and track criminal recruiters who moved between countries. Educational components helped young people and their families recognize and resist recruitment tactics. Most importantly, economic development projects created real opportunities for advancement that could compete with the false promises offered by criminal organizations. Dr. Amina Kone, who had been appointed to head the Youth Protection Initiative, regularly cited the Iron Forge operation as demonstrating both the scope of the challenge and the potential for effective response. President Traoré's operation showed us that these criminal networks are sophisticated, international, and deeply embedded in our communities, Dr. Cohn explained during a program evaluation meeting. But it also showed us that with proper preparation, international cooperation, and willingness to take risks for our young people, we can disrupt these networks and provide better alternatives The program's success was measured not just in arrests and prosecutions, but in the number of young people who chose legitimate opportunities over criminal recruitment. Within 2 years of the Iron Forge operation, youth unemployment in the region had decreased by 15%, while enrollment in vocational training programs had increased by over 40%. These statistics represented thousands of individual decisions to pursue legitimate opportunities rather than accepting the false promises of criminal organizations. Each young person who chose proper education, legitimate employment, or lawful business development represented a victory over the exploitation that Stone's organization had represented. Legal proceedings against Stone and his associates had also set important precedents for international criminal prosecution. The coordinated approach to evidence gathering and prosecution had resulted in conviction rates significantly higher than typical transnational crime cases. More importantly, the asset recovery operations had generated funds that were being used to support victim rehabilitation and prevention programs. Stone himself had been sentenced to 25 years in prison after pleading guilty to charges in 3 countries. His cooperation with investigators had been extensive, but the information he provided painted a sobering picture of how easily criminal organizations could exploit social vulnerabilities. The scariest thing about Stone's testimony, Captain Dubois noted, is how systematic his approach was. He didn't just randomly recruit victims. He specifically targeted communities and individuals who were most vulnerable to his particular type of exploitation. This suggests that other criminal organizations are probably using similar systematic approaches. This insight had led to the development of more sophisticated prevention programs that focused on building resilience in vulnerable communities rather than simply trying to catch criminals. After they had already begun operating, Ibrahim's personal involvement in the operation had also changed his approach to governance more broadly. The experience of working undercover had given him insights into the daily realities faced by his citizens that couldn't be gained through traditional presidential briefings and official visits. Every leader should spend time experiencing what life is really like for the people they serve. Ibrahim reflected during a private conversation with his senior advisors. The view from the president's office is very different from the view from a janitor's cart. Both perspectives are necessary for effective governance. This philosophy led to Ibrahim regularly engaging in what his staff privately called reality checks, periods, where he would interact with citizens in informal settings, often without the typical security and protocol arrangements that usually surrounded presidential activities. These interactions provided ongoing intelligence about emerging challenges and opportunities, while also demonstrating to citizens that their president remained connected to their daily experiences. The approach was unconventional but proved highly effective in maintaining public trust and identifying problems before they could reach crisis levels. The Iron Forge operation had also influenced Ibrahim's approach to international relations. His willingness to take personal risks for his citizens had earned respect from other leaders, but more importantly, it had demonstrated the potential for small countries to have significant impact on global challenges through innovative approaches and international cooperation. Size doesn't determine influence, Ibrahim explained during a speech to the African Union. What determines influence is willingness to take risks for your principles, to work effectively with international partners, and to develop innovative solutions to shared challenges. This perspective had led to Burkina Faso playing a much larger role in regional security cooperation, despite being one of the smaller countries in West Africa. Ibrahim's government had become a hub for intelligence sharing and cooperative law enforcement efforts, while also serving as a model for other countries facing similar challenges. The transformation of the Iron Forge Academy into a community center had become a powerful symbol of the possibility for positive change. The building that had once represented exploitation and criminality now housed programs that were creating legitimate opportunities for hundreds of young people. Every month, the center held what staff called transformation celebrations, events where program participants could showcase their achievements and progress. These celebrations attracted visitors from around the world who wanted to see firsthand how criminal enterprises could be converted into forces for positive community development. During one such celebration, Ibrahim was approached by a young woman named Fatima, who had been indirectly affected by Stone's organization. Her brother had been recruited by Stone's network and had suffered significant psychological trauma before the operation shut down the criminal enterprise. "Mr. President," Fatima said, "my brother is doing much better now. He's in the vocational training program and is learning to be a mechanic. But I wanted to ask you, how did you know that going undercover was the right approach? Weren't you afraid that it might not work?" Ibrahim considered her question carefully before responding. "Fatima, fear is a normal response to risk, and yes, I was afraid. But I was more afraid of what would happen to young people like your brother if we didn't take action. Sometimes leadership requires accepting personal risk to protect others from much greater risks." This exchange highlighted one of the most important lessons from the Iron Forge operation, that effective leadership often required making difficult choices between personal safety and public responsibility. Ibrahim's willingness to take personal risks had been crucial to the operation's success, but it had also set an example for other leaders about the importance of personal commitment to public service. As the second anniversary of the operation approached, planning began for a comprehensive evaluation of its long-term effects. The assessment would examine not just the immediate law enforcement results, but the broader social and economic changes that had resulted from the intervention. Initial data suggested that the operation had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Crime rates among young people had decreased significantly. Educational achievement had improved. Most importantly, surveys indicated that young people in the region felt more optimistic about their future prospects and more confident in their government's commitment to their welfare. These outcomes represented the true measure of the operation's success, not just the dramatic scenes of Ibrahim fighting Stone's enforcers, but the quieter victories of young people choosing education over exploitation, legitimate employment over criminal recruitment, and hope over despair. 2 years after the Iron Forge Academy operation, Ibrahim Traoré stood once again in the converted community center, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him stood representatives from 12 countries, all of whom had implemented programs based on the lessons learned from his undercover mission. The gathering was part of the first international conference on youth protection and community transformation, an event that had grown out of the international cooperation triggered by the original operation. Delegates from around the world had come to share experiences, compare strategies, and coordinate future efforts to combat the criminal exploitation of young people. 2 years ago, I walked into this building as a janitor with a mop and bucket. Ibrahim addressed the assembled delegates. Today we gather here as representatives of a global movement committed to protecting our most precious resource, our young people, from those who would exploit their dreams for profit. The conference represented more than just the continuation of successful law enforcement cooperation. It symbolized a fundamental shift in how societies approach the challenge of youth vulnerability, moving from reactive punishment to proactive protection and opportunity creation. Marcus, now studying business administration while working part-time as a peer counselor, served as one of the conference's youth representatives. His transformation from potential victim to community leader exemplified the kind of positive change the Iron Forge operation had been designed to achieve. The criminals who tried to exploit us saw only our desperation and vulnerability, Marcus told the international delegates. But President Traoré and the programs that grew out of his operation saw our potential and gave us the tools to realize it. That's the difference between exploitation and empowerment. As the conference concluded with commitments for expanded international cooperation and increased investment in youth development programs, Ibrahim reflected on how much had changed since that evening when he first entered Iron Forge Academy with his cleaning cart, the building around him still housed the same dreams and ambitions that Stone had tried to exploit. But now those dreams were being nurtured through legitimate opportunities rather than criminal manipulation. Young people still gathered here to pursue their goals, but now they did so with proper support, realistic guidance, and genuine concern for their well-being. The janitor's uniform Ibrahim had worn during the operation was now displayed in a case near the center's entrance, along with photographs and documents telling the story of the building's transformation. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most effective way to fight injustice was to meet it where it lived, on its own terms, with courage and determination. But perhaps the most important lesson from the Iron Forge operation was that real change required more than dramatic interventions. It required sustained commitment to addressing underlying problems, consistent international cooperation, and most importantly, unwavering belief in the potential of young people to choose hope over despair when given genuine alternatives. As Ibrahim prepared to leave the conference and return to his presidential duties, he carried with him the knowledge that the fight against exploitation was ongoing. New challenges would emerge, new criminals would attempt to profit from vulnerability, and new responses would be required. However, he also carried the confidence that came from knowing that effective action was possible when leaders were willing to take personal risks for their principles, when countries were willing to cooperate across boundaries, and when communities were committed to protecting their most vulnerable members. The Iron Forge Academy operation had been successful, not because it was dramatic, but because it was part of a comprehensive approach to social transformation. The real victory wasn't measured in the criminals who were arrested or the money that was seized, but in the young people who were now pursuing their dreams through legitimate channels, building their futures on solid foundations rather than false promises. Standing in the community center that had once been the heart of a criminal empire, Ibrahim could see the future that operation had helped create. A future where young people's dreams were resources to be nurtured rather than commodities to be exploited. Where international cooperation made communities safer rather than just making criminals richer, and where leadership meant being willing to fight for justice even when that fight required personal sacrifice. The janitor's uniform in the display case would remain as a reminder of those 3 days when a president became an undercover operative. But the real legacy of the Iron Forge operation would be measured in the decades of young lives that would be lived with dignity, opportunity and hope rather than exploitation, despair and broken dreams. In the end, that was what justice looked like. Not just the moment when criminals were defeated, but the lifetime of possibilities that opened up when courage and commitment created space for human potential to flourish.